It is my duty to inform the House that the Speaker is unavoidably absent. Therefore, in accordance with the statutes, I would ask the Assistant Deputy Speaker to please take the chair.
O eternal and almighty God, from whom all power and wisdom come, we are assembled here before thee to frame such laws as may tend to the welfare and prosperity of our province. Grant, O merciful God, we pray thee, that we may desire only that which is in accordance with thy will, that we may seek it with wisdom and know it with certainty, and accomplish it perfectly, for the glory and honor of thy name and for the welfare of our people. Amen. We acknowledge we are gathered on Treaty 1 territory, and that Manitoba is located on the treaty territories and ancestral lands of Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Dakota Oyate, Denisoulene, and Nihitowag nations. We acknowledge Manitoba is located on the homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are the ancestral lands of the Inuit. We respect the spirit and intent of treaties and treaty making, and remain committed to working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. Please be seated. Orders of the day, private members' business. I have a statement for the House. I'm advising the House that Madam Speaker received a letter from the Government House Leader and the member for River Heights indicating that the member for River Heights has identified Bill 238, the Personal Care Home Accountability Act, various acts amended, as his selected bill for this session. As a reminder to the House, Rule 25 permits each independent member to select one private member's bill per session to proceed to a second reading vote, and requires the Government House Leader and the member to provide written notice as to the date and time of the debate and the vote. In accordance with this rule and the letter, Bill 238 will be called for debate this morning as follows. Debate on second reading will begin at 10 a.m. Question put on the second reading motion at 10:55 a.m. Accordingly, I will now recognize the honorable member for River Heights to move his second reading motion to begin this debate. The honorable member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I move, seconded by the MLA for Tyndall Park, that Bill number 238, the Personal Care Home Accountability Act, various acts amended, la loi sur la responsabilisation des foyers de soins personnels, modification de diverses lois, be now read a second time and be referred to a committee of this House.
It has been moved by the honorable member for River Heights, seconded by the honorable member for Tyndall Park, that Bill number 238, the Personal Care Home Accountability Act, various acts amended, be now read a second time and be referred to a committee of this House. The honorable member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, Bill 238 provides for the establishment and the operation of family councils in personal care homes. Well, family councils have been attempted to be set up in some personal care homes. There's not a legislative framework for them. This bill provides for the councils and sets up sufficient parameters to ensure that personal care homes will set up councils and that such councils can be an important bridge between residents and operators of personal care homes in order to improve the quality of care in these homes. We learned from the experience during COVID-19 that we need to make improvements in personal care homes. Our seniors, who have contributed in a major way to the quality of life that we experience today, are precious people. They need to be able to spend the last years of their lives in a high quality of life, in dignity, and in a loving environment. Our elders deserve no less. During the many years that I have served as the MLA for River Heights, I've seen numerous issues that have arisen in personal care homes. As an example, there has been and still is a tendency to be too quick to use antipsychotic drugs. A number of years ago, when I was visiting in Portage la Prairie, there were many issues at Lions Prairie Manor. After I raised these concerns, which were brought to me by family members, there was an investigation conducted by the Protection for Persons in Care Office. The Protections for Persons in Care Office found 12 cases of mistreatment. It should be noted that this was a facility which was a public facility operated by Southern Health. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we all saw terrible tragedies in personal care homes in Manitoba. A COVID-19 outbreak at the Maples Long-Term Care Home in Winnipeg occurred in the fall of 2020. 74 staff and 157 residents tested positive for COVID-19, and there were 56 deaths linked to that outbreak. And there were many more deaths and problems in other personal care homes, which were revealed also during the pandemic. Conditions at the Maples Long-Term Care Home were a disaster, in part because the provincial government failed to heed the warnings that Liberal MLAs had provided 5 months previously before the outbreak of COVID in the Maples personal care homes. Liberals had noted that at outbreaks in other jurisdictions, there was an almost immediate loss of many staff who were either infected or had to be quarantined because there were close contacts of those who were infected. Liberals had called in May of that year for the province to have a rapid response team well-trained and ready for this. The government failed to put in place the rapid response team until after the disastrous outbreak was raging in full force. 56 lives were lost because inadequate preparations were not made. Today, we are talking about important changes so that family members can form a family council and provide input to the operator and the staff at the personal care home. There are several reasons why such a family council is really important. One of these is that for a number of reasons, resident councils are not sufficiently effective. Some or many residents in a personal care home may have a degree of dementia. Some or many residents in the personal care home may feel intimidated by staff and be reluctant to speak up. Some may have difficulty in speaking up because their native language is not English or French, or because of a stroke or other debilitating condition. Family members and/or close friends of residents of a personal care home often spend long hours in the home, spending time with and caring for their loved ones who are residents of the home. They are frequently very good and close observers of what is happening and as such can provide highly knowledgeable advice to the operators and staff of the personal care home. But, and this is the rub, in order to provide such advice, there needs to be a more formal process, and that is why this legislation, to enable and facilitate the formation of family councils and their operation, is so important. This legislation provides for the establishment of family councils, which will facilitate communication between family members and the operator of the personal care home. They will also provide a venue where family concerns can be discussed and brought forward. I mentioned earlier that it's possible to try to set up a family council now, but the process is not adequate. I give you an example. A number of concerns arose at Extendicare Oakview Place. A group of family members got together informally, sort of like a family council. They did their best to communicate their concerns with the operator and the staff of the personal care homes, but the process was not nearly as effective as it could have been with a formal process and an established family council. If there had been a family council set up ahead of time, indeed, the problems might have been prevented or at least been caught before they rose to the extent that they did. If there had been a formal family council, they could have achieved much more to help the residents. It is the experience at Extendicare Oakview Place which led directly to bringing forward this bill. It is my experience personally that talking with family members of personal care home residents over many years, that tells me that family councils are badly needed. Family councils can be very effective, in particular in improving the quality of care for residents of personal care homes. And that is why we need this legislation, and that is why I hope that all MLAs will support this bill to be passed in second reading today and go to committee for the next stage. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Merci, miigwech.
A question period of up to 10 minutes will be held, and questions may be addressed in the following sequence. The first question may be asked by a member from another party. Any subsequent questions must follow a rotation between parties. Each independent member may ask one question, and no question or answer shall exceed 45 seconds. The honourable member for Dawson Trail.
This proposed legislation would establish the role of family councils. Can the member opposite speak how family is defined within this proposed legislation?
The honourable member for River Heights.
Yeah, it is the intent to have this defined broadly, and that is that it is my experience that it is often not just a wife or a husband who is there. It is very often a daughter or a son or a granddaughter or a grandson. Sometimes it is a parent. Occasionally, if you have somebody who is in a personal care home because they have had a stroke when they're very young, it could even be an aunt or an uncle.
The member's time has expired. The honourable member for Union Station.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, with that question in mind regarding how is family defined, can the member provide clarity in regards to what the options there might be for someone living in a personal care home who maybe doesn't have any blood-related family living in the city or the province or a location that would allow them to participate? So the definition of family, is it broad enough to include those who aren't biologically linked to personal care home residents?
The honourable member for River Heights.
Yeah, I thank the member for the question. The bill very specifically allows for the inclusion of one or more representatives of personal care home residents. And so that representative could be a friend, it could be whoever the resident chooses, and indeed, it could be more than one person. So the legislation is permissive. It is meant to be friendly to those who care for their loved ones in the personal care home, and not to be exclusive.
The honourable member for McPhillips.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I thank my colleague for introducing this legislation this morning. When we're talking about family councils, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm wondering if the member can share any other jurisdictions in Canada that this is modeled after, and more important, their impact positively and negatively as to where we could go with this legislation in terms of supporting it.
The honourable member for River Heights.
Yeah, Ontario's Fixing Long-Term Care Act in 2021 sets out provisions to allow every long-term care home to establish a family council. So that's Ontario. Alberta's Resident and Family Councils Act in 2018 supports the establishment of resident and family councils. And to be noted that this allows the participation of residents. BC's Community Care and Assisted Living Act 2002 sets out the right for residents to be represented by a family council, and the experience, to the extent that I'm aware of it, has been positive.
The honourable member for Union Station.
Can the member provide any insight as to whether or not he thinks that the PC government's failure to meet their own commitment of establishing 1,200 additional personal care home beds has had any impact on the state of personal care homes across Manitoba? We know that, in fact, there's been a net loss of approximately 216 personal care home beds, despite this government's commitment in 2016 to add 1,200 additional personal care home beds. So can the member provide his thoughts on whether or not this failure to meet their own standards and actually have a net loss of these beds has had an impact on personal care homes in Manitoba?
The honourable member for River Heights.
Yeah, the stresses on personal care homes over a number of years clearly show that the family council is badly needed. And it really doesn't depend on the size or the number of homes. It depends on the fact that each home should have an operating family council, and this can be very beneficial. At times when there are stresses in a home, then families participate in a myriad of ways, and it can be very, very helpful. And that's another reason why this family council is so important.
The honourable member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for River Heights for bringing forward this really important piece of legislation, and just for all of the work he has done to help seniors in our province here in Manitoba. My question for the member is, could he speak a little bit to how a family council would not only help the residents who are living in long-term care homes, but it's also a grounds and a means for friends and families who may have loved ones in long-term care homes? Could he speak a little bit to that?
The honourable member for River Heights.
Yeah, we've seen over the last number of years how important it is throughout the health system to have people who are advocates for those who are vulnerable, in this case, those who are residents. And in this case, having family or friends, being able to advocate them is extraordinarily important. And it's a benefit not just to the residents and the families, it's a benefit to the operator of the home, because they can bring forward issues which will make the operation of the home better and smoother. And so really it's a no-brainer. Whichever way you look at it, we need to do this.
The honourable member for Union Station.
Can the member provide a bit of his thoughts on how the concerns that would be brought forward by this council would be actioned? So what's the relationship between the council and the personal care home and the I guess, the protocols or the mechanisms that would be in place in order for the concerns or ideas that would be brought forward by such council to actually be actioned upon. So I'm just curious to know, what resources are needed in order to support that? Is it more resources from government, or what exactly needs to be in place?
The honourable member for River Heights.
Yeah, this family council includes the presence of one or more representatives of the operator of the personal care home. It includes provisions that the personal care home operator must provide some specific helpful information to members of the family council, but it provides most of all an opportunity for dialogue. And I think that that's where this really can be most useful, that the operator of the personal care home can learn a tremendous amount, in my experience, from talking with family members, and that there are incredible opportunities for improvement. And of course, if an operator is not fulfilling their promise,
The honourable member's time has expired. The honourable member for Dawson Trail.
Can the member explain, by making these reports of abuse or neglect publicly available, how will this impact the personal safety and right to privacy for the residents and the family impacted by the neglect or abuse?
The honourable member for River Heights.
Yeah, the information that is collected and provided is aggregate information. It's not releasing personal information about individual residents. I want to finish up what I said earlier on. If an operator is not working substantially with the council, then the family members can come to their MLA, like the MLA for Notre Dame, and their MLA can bring forward the issues in a venue like this. Thank you.
The honourable member for Union Station.
So I appreciate the member providing the responses he has so far. He's provided a good amount of detail in his answers, and I'm wondering about the reports that would be made public. It can be very distressing for families to read reports of that nature online. And I'm wondering if he can provide some clarity around what the descriptions would be, what would they look like online? So what would the criteria be in terms of what information is disseminated and made public? How would the FIA rights of residents be protected? And also, how do we ensure that people reading that information have the support?
The member's time has expired. The honourable member for River Heights.
Yeah, the kind of information which is provided online is information which is helpful to families. In my experience, for example, even with the very distressing report of the Maples personal care home, that family members were actually very pleased that the problems were brought out into the open so they could be discussed and then resolved. And the expectation here is that providing what is really a fairly minimum amount of information can considerably improve the ability of families to advocate for residents and to improve conditions.
Time for questions has now expired. The floor is open for debate. The honourable member for Dawson Trail.
I'd like to thank the member for River Heights for bringing forward Bill 238, the Personal Care Home Accountability Act. I'm thankful to be in a riding that supports our seniors. In Dawson Trail, we have 2 senior service groups, Same River Senior Services for Seniors and Taché Senior Resources. Both these groups work to ensure our seniors have the resources and supports they need, and I am grateful for the wonderful work they do. I'd also be remiss to not mention the Villa Uville and the fantastic work they do. They've got a very unique setting there in St. Anne, where they've got from the PCHN all the way to assisted living, as well as independent living. And I find that this family model that the member for River Heights is talking about is really kind of magnified in that facility, because if you have someone in the PCH and they're married and they can still live in the independent living. They're under the one roof, so they can come back and forth. As a son, a brother, and a father, I understand the importance of having family that is involved in my life, and me in theirs, and family that is able to stand up and advocate for one another. We all have a duty to ensure our seniors are taken care of. We have a duty to support all Manitobans in their aging journeys. Not only do we need to support our seniors, but also their families and their caregivers along the way. Who better is there to advocate and determine the best care for our seniors than family that has been there from day one? Our parents, our grandparents, our aunts and uncles, they are the ones who have installed the values that we have in us today. We have an obligation to them to also make sure that their values, their needs are being met in every way possible. Our government has always known that our aging population is of the utmost importance, and we have tremendous amount of respect for them. After everything they have contributed to our way of life, raising their families and building our communities, and what they continue to contribute to Manitoba, we know they deserve the best. The goal of our Manitoba government is to support the health and well-being of our seniors and their loved ones. Manitoba seniors deserve to have the respect and dignity of the independent, empowered lives. And for the first time ever, our government has put a minister in charge of our seniors. A minister that has put forward a senior strategy to focus and invest in the well-being of seniors in our province. Our minister is consulting with seniors and those who work with and care for and love them to make sure they have the best interest at heart. If that doesn't show our Manitoba government's dedication to supporting our aging population the way they want, I don't know if anything will. All of us need and want different things, and that is why bringing initiatives to ensure our seniors have what they want and need is important. New initiatives that ensure older adults can age in their communities and their homes as long as they choose will enhance their quality of life. Our government made historic investments in Budget 2023. The Department of Seniors and Long-Term Care increased the initiatives by over 72%. What was $54 million is now $92 million, and that is incredible. Together, we're making Manitoba a great place to age. Our government has committed over $45 million in funding to support the implementation of the 17 recommendations of the Stevenson Review. The recommendations will help strengthen the care provided in all of Manitoba personal care homes and will make a difference for families, staff, and residents. The Stevenson Review highlighted the need for improving staffing levels, and our government isn't listening. There was an increase of $13.8 million that is being provided in 2023-2024 in response to the Stevenson Review to implement staff and emergency preparedness technology improvements in personal care homes all across Manitoba. This $13.8 million encompasses targeted funding for the following initiatives stemming from the Stevenson's Review. Establishing an infection prevention and control program to better prepare for any disease outbreaks. Increased allied health staffing within PCHs, including occupational therapists, physiotherapists, rehab aides, dietitians, social workers, and recreational therapists. Increased housekeeping staff, which will include healthcare aides, registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, enhanced information and communication capabilities to better manage human resources, staffing issues before they become critical, enhancing internet access for personal care homes in rural and northern locations, and increased emergency management staffing. I must say that some of the stories that I have come forward regarding the lack of care for seniors across our nation is an absolute tragedy. That is why I'm so honored to be part of a government and to work alongside my colleagues who wholeheartedly care for the elderly in Manitoba and work tirelessly to ensure that everyone has what they need when they need it. The health and well-being of Manitobans is our top priority as we move forward and heal Manitoba after going through a pandemic. Again, would like to thank the member for River Heights for bringing forward Bill 238, the Personal Care Home Accountability Act.
The member for Union Station.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Deputy Speaker. I'm always grateful to put a few words on the record in regards to healthcare in Manitoba. And this is a particularly important issue as it is speaking, directly to the needs of seniors in our province, disproportionately seniors. Seniors are not the only people who live in personal care homes, but they are the majority of folks who reside in long-term care and personal care homes. And so I'll be speaking to this bill through that lens, Acting Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank our colleague, the MLA for River Heights, for bringing this bill forward. He's already put words on the record that outline sort of where his perspective is coming from and amplifying the voices of families that he's been in communication with. And I really respect that. I think it's really important that when we bring any legislation forward that we ensure that we're centering the voices and the lived experiences of those who are most impacted by legislation. And so I want to thank him for making the effort to bring this bill forward. Here in Manitoba, since 2016, we have seen the current government not take the necessary steps to ensure that long-term care, personal care homes across our province are adequately resourced. We saw, funding to personal care homes cut pre-pandemic. We saw aspects of healthcare that we know seniors really depend on being there for them and having strong infrastructure be cut and undermined by this government. One basic example would be cuts that were made to inpatient physiotherapy and occupational therapy in hospitals. A cut that would see many seniors, to date we know, well over 1,000 folks, but many seniors not be able to get the physiotherapy and occupational therapy they needed in hospital post hip and knee surgeries, which I think the general public understands the implications of that, but certainly if you've taken any time to do a little bit of reading in this area, you understand that when seniors undergo surgeries of that magnitude, of that significance, the recovery process within the first 24 to 72 hours post-op is incredibly important. And not having in that first 24 to 72, extending to about a week or two, not having occupational and physiotherapy available really impacted negatively the outcomes for these seniors. And so we see that folks, in personal care homes and in long-term care who depend on those homes being adequately resourced. We see that folks who depend on our healthcare system in areas like orthopedic surgery being adequately resourced. We see that unfortunately, due to this government's cuts and mismanagement of our healthcare system, how that's negatively impacted seniors in Manitoba and ultimately negatively impacted the health outcomes of seniors in Manitoba. And I mentioned pre-pandemic decision-making because we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic what happens when a government cuts healthcare to the bone. You create a healthcare system that cannot respond to the acute needs of its citizens. And we saw that personal care homes in Manitoba, which had been underfunded and cut by this government, we saw that personal care homes who relied on staff who under this government had had their wages frozen for quite some time. We saw personal care homes where allied healthcare professionals were denied a contract by this government. We saw them unable to react or even act proactively and respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And as a result, there were catastrophic outcomes. This is a government that has been resistant to providing information to Manitobans, basic information that Manitobans depend on to know how to better support their loved ones in personal care homes. It should be stated on the record as a reminder to this House, especially considering this bill is talking about publishing reports online and being transparent. That's really what it's talking about. That the only reason why Manitobans were made aware of what was going on at Maple's personal care home, where 56 residents died during the pandemic, was because a paramedic posted what they witnessed when they were called to respond to Maple's personal care home on Reddit. A local paramedic responded to a call from Maple's personal care home and described nightmarish circumstances and posted it on Reddit because they knew that that might be the only way the government would pay attention. That is an incredibly shameful moment in Manitoba's history, where the only way a government would respond to dozens of residents dying in a personal care home was due to a social media post from a first responder. It's incredibly shameful because this government had actually been asked for help before that point and had not responded. And time again, that is what we see from this government. People reaching out for help, pleading for help, asking their government to do what a government is supposed to do, and this government closing the door on those folks who are pleading for their assistance. And in the case of Maple's personal care home, the outcomes were devastating. And rightly so, many Manitoba families have mobilized for the sake of other families not having to go through what they endured, to see changes happen in our healthcare system in regards to long-term care and personal care homes. I know that the government will say things like, well, you know what, we've got the Stevenson report and we're acting on that, and that's good enough. But we also know that the Stevenson report is inherently flawed, that probably one of the most important, if not the most important question posed to this government, posed in regards to that report, was who is responsible? Who is responsible for the devastation we saw at Maples, at Parkview Place, in long-term care homes across Manitoba? And that is the one question that report not only failed to answer, but avoided answering entirely, intentionally. And so that report is inherently flawed because there's actually no accountability at the heart of it. And I've said this before in the House, that in order for anyone, particularly a government, to move forward in a better way, in a way that improves our healthcare system, you've got to be dealing with a government that's accountable. And this is a government, this PC government, first under Brian Pallister, now under the Stephenson government, that has done everything they possibly can to avoid accountability. They'll blame anybody and everybody else before looking in their political mirrors and saying, you know what, we have to be the ones to fix the mistakes and the chaos we've created. And so I certainly understand the desire to create new mechanisms for accountability, for transparency, because those are the areas this government continues to fail and refuse to invest in. We still have inadequate staffing across personal care homes in Manitoba. Allied healthcare professionals still don't have a deal in Manitoba, which is mitigating our ability to retain and recruit allied healthcare professionals to personal care homes. We still are losing nurses from our healthcare system in droves right now because of this mistreatment by this government. Long-term care homes still do not have the support that they deserve from this government. And seniors across Manitoba are well aware of that, and they will remember that in the coming months as we head to the polls. So I thank the member for bringing this forward, and I want to make it very clear that this government has failed seniors. They failed personal care home staff who love their jobs and want personal care homes to be stronger in Manitoba. And the fact that we have a net loss of personal care home beds in Manitoba despite their promise is a disgrace. Thank you.
The honourable member for Springfield Richot.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Acting Deputy Speaker. And always a pleasure to get up and speak to important legislation. I'd like to thank the member for River Heights for the work that he has put into this. I have served for many years with the member from River Heights, and great respect for him and the work that he does. In case the chamber doesn't know, he was one of the most preeminent pediatric oncologists this province ever had and did amazing work. And so I'd like to focus my attention to this legislation and dealing with family councils at personal care homes. I look around the chamber and I say to each and every member here, there's only a matter of time which separates us from perhaps needing these services. So we want to be very mindful of what happens. We probably have loved ones in them, whether it's grandparents or parents or aging aunts and uncles or relatives of some kind, friends. And so they're very important. They are important to what we do here as a society, taking care of our aged. It's important. These are men and women who have done amazing amount of work for us, for our city and for province and our country. And we want to make sure that they are well taken care of. One of the things for those who go and visit personal care homes is often they are faced with an amazing amount of loneliness. The days tend to be long. They don't really get the visitors. Their families are busy. Sometimes families choose not to visit them. So it's important that we have a family council. We have individuals who will give input into what it's like to be a family member of a resident. And I'm sure the member for River Heights did some consultation at the personal care homes to see how they were going to be viewing these additions to the personal care home. And in fact, when this someday gets to a committee, we will then be able to hear what personal care homes have to say about it. But again, it is a very sensitive and very serious issue because I myself personally have been and visited a lot of loved ones and individuals that I care for greatly in personal care homes. And you can't leave without being touched by how beautiful these people are and how much they absolutely love to have someone visit. In fact, my children's great aunt who came here from Russia was in a personal care home, the personal care home right by Concordia Hospital. And I remember taking the kids to visit her, if not once a week, certainly once every 10 days. And she just loved it. She loved when family came and visited, and we would speak with the care providers. Anyway, the kids were out visiting family at the lake, so I went and I visited Tanta Lydia. And the personal care home attendants came to myself as one of the family and suggested that maybe end-of-life protocols should be engaged, that she was slipping very quickly and she was basically coming in and out of consciousness. But I went and I visited with her in her room, and very softly she said to me, where are the kids? I said, well, I'm here. And she said, where are the kids? I said, well, you know what, they're not going to be back till Monday or Tuesday, but I'll bring them in as soon as they come back from the lake. And I explained it to her and talked to her. And she said, okay. And she said, you know, do you think you could get me some coffee? And I got her some warm coffee, and we sat, and I served her coffee, and it was a very special moment. Until the kids came back from the lake, she perked up and started eating and was waiting for the kids to come. So kids came back from the lake, and I took them to see Tanta Lydia, and we went in and we visited, and she just beamed, just glowed. I had a wonderful time, and the kids still sang her a couple of songs, which she really loved, and she was just delightful, just beaming, and just loved the fact the kids came and hugged and kissed them before they left, and she was so happy. And 2 days later, she passed away. She just lived to see them one more time. Families are important to have them engaged and involved, and this is important that we always stand there for those who walk the path to make our cities and our province and our country better than when they got here, and we hope someday we have the same care, and we certainly support this legislation.
Are there any further speakers to this bill? Seeing no further question or speakers, is the House ready for the question? The question before the House is second reading of Bill number 238, the Personal Care Home Accountability Act, various acts amended. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. They said? Okay. I haven't heard any no's. The motion is accordingly passed. The hour being... Somebody has. The Honorable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. Could you please canvass the House to see if it's the will of members to call at 11 a.m.?
Is it the will of the members to call at 11 a.m.? Agreed. We will now move on to private members' resolution. The hour being 10:49, we will end at 11:49, just to give everybody notice that we will be done at 11:49. The private members' resolution before us today is resumption of debate on resolution number 9, calling on the federal government to absorb the cost of increased RCMP salaries, standing in the name of the member from Burroughs, who has 10 minutes remaining. The honorable member for Burroughs.
Thank you, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker. It's an honor to rise in the House today and speak to this private member's resolution. The burden of this expense is huge, and our municipalities, they need help, no doubt about it. And we all know that our municipalities are not in a good financial state for years. This resolution brought forward by member from Dauphin, if we take a look on the wording, it clearly tells us. I would actually request the municipal leaders to take a look on the detailed wording of this PMR. it clearly tells that this government is not actually in favor of getting funding from the feds. Neither they have funded municipalities well for the last 7 years. So, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker, we all know that when we ask for help, we should ask in a way that makes somebody help us. What if I come to you and say, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker, that I don't like you, would you buy me a coffee? How does that sound? I will not get a coffee from you. What if I go to somebody for help and I say, I hate your policies, please give me some money? No, we are not getting any help. This resolution, the way it's worded, it's more about condemning the federal government and official opposition than asking for money or asking for help for our municipalities. It's very clear. And if this government really intends to help our municipalities, why didn't they help municipalities for the last 7 years? The resolution sounds to me like the PC government saying to the feds, hey, can you do something that we didn't do? Can you please fund our municipalities because we didn't do so? So if funding municipalities is the right thing to do, this PC government should have done this earlier. This government is simply following Brian Pallister's cuts and closure policy. And it's visible from their decisions. The new premier also followed the same policy, nothing changed. And when we talk about this RCMP retroactive salary, these costs are owed back to 2017. That's why it's $45 million that municipalities are supposed to take care of if they don't get any support from anywhere. What would the municipalities do? They would either cut some services to save money, or they would increase tax, or they would do the both. And that too at a time when Manitobans are undergoing so much stress due to the grocery prices hike, fuel prices hike, and fertilizer prices hike. If this government is really, really serious about getting some money, or they want to speak in support of the municipalities, why didn't they stand up and speak in favor of the municipalities? This PMR is on the floor, I think, for the third time. I didn't see them stand up and speak in support of municipalities. So municipal leaders should know their intentions. And I don't know if the Premier already reached out to the Prime Minister to ask for help. I don't know. So nobody is stopping the Premier or the Cabinet Ministers to reach out to the federal government, write to them, and ask for support. So I understand that this resolution is purposely drafted in a partisan style so that they that this resolution does not go anywhere, because attacking opposition seems more important to the PCs than helping municipalities. And we all know that that they cut so many services. They cut, in 2017, they cut 50/50 transit funding that impacted Winnipeg, worth millions of dollars, and Brandon hundreds of thousands of dollars. They also cut infrastructure funds by millions of dollars. And they don't like to spend money. They underspent budgeted infrastructure in 4 years to the tune of $1 billion. So if money is budgeted for a purpose, what's the reason for not spending it? And then they downloaded this responsibility of snow clearing to the municipalities. Was that a way of helping municipalities or punishing them for the great work they're doing? And during the COVID times, the former minister responsible for municipalities wrote a letter to municipalities pushing for layoff and cut wages. So this is the record of this government. And they refused additional funding for snow clearing to Winnipeg when it was harsh winter. And the city had to pay $33.1 million accumulated from snow clearing. So their policy is not to help municipalities, to starve the departments, to cut services. I want to remind Manitobans about Bill 37, which is an effort to centralize decision-making. So land use decisions transfer to minister and municipal board. So whatever the municipalities decide, the government would have power to change that decision forever. So that's like silencing the local voices. And affected municipalities have opposed this legislation. When this PC government talks about crime, let's see their record on crime. Under their watch, in 2019, Winnipeg had 44 homicides. And that is double than 2018 numbers. That was under their watch. 2020 numbers, 43. 2021 numbers, 43 again. So this is their record. So I would like to say that municipalities, they do need help, but we need a government that really understands and that really wishes and takes action to support municipalities. We would continue to advocate for investments in services that address the root causes of crime, such as healthcare, education, mental health, and addiction services, and recreation opportunities so that communities can be safer long-term. And we would call on the province to construct a new healing lodge in Dauphin that
The member's time has expired. The honourable member for Fort Garry.
Thank you, Mr. I'll take it. Thank you, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker. When I was looking through the Stephenson government motion that we're debating this morning, I thought back to my childhood, 1970s, watching TV, and there was a show on TV, which is the #1 show, probably in North America. It's called Happy Days. And this thing had been going on for years at the #1 spot, and overnight, it just fell off. Jump the shark.
And what had happened in the episode that they traced back to its demise was the main character was wearing a leather jacket on water skis, literally jumping over a shark. It was so ridiculous, so implausible that this much beloved TV show absolutely collapsed in the ratings. And of course, it became a cultural phenomenon. And today, we actually refer to shows that are past their best before date as jumping the shark. And when I look at this resolution, this is very much the political equivalent of jumping the shark. This is not a serious resolution. This is not a serious government. We do not have a serious justice minister. You know, when you look at this, it's so, it even is internally ridiculous and contradictory. So in the first part of the purpose or the preamble of this, the Stephenson government is critical of the federal Liberal government for, I quote, huge increases in salary for members of the RCMP. And then in the exact same motion says that the federal Liberals are defunding the police. Well, how is it? Are they massively putting, more resources into policing, or are they defunding? Well, this government doesn't know, and quite frankly, they don't care, because if anybody is defunding the police around here, it's this Stephenson government, right? Because we know that they have the power to fix this situation. They have, with the stroke of the pen, this minister, if he was serious, and I'm not saying he is, he could go back to his office and fix this right now. And the question for this body is why? Why is this unserious Minister of Justice refusing to do the job that taxpayers pay him? He certainly isn't asking himself to be defunded. And why isn't he going back to his office right now and solving this problem and fixing it? Well, because they're not interested in public safety, and we've seen that for 7 years. In 7 years, we've gone from a relatively safe province to one where people live in our bus shelters. We have gone from having a mental health system that was no model by any means, but it certainly wasn't on the verge of collapse, and of course is collapsing now. And there is a direct line between the policies of this government and Manitobans being less safe. We have seen not only the cuts to healthcare, not only cuts to education, but we've seen the cuts to affordable housing, we've seen cuts to mental health supports, and we've seen cuts to social services, rent assist, EIA, the list goes on and on and on. And this government, which is extreme, I think they only rivaled by their friends in Alberta in their ideological extremity, they don't believe that Manitobans have an obligation to take care of one another. They believe that everybody is on their own, and to them, investing in Manitobans is an expense, it's a waste, and they don't want to do it because they need money to send the Galen Westons of the world hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayers' money. And and if you're a party that's built on a foundation of greed, then that's your focus. That's what you're all about, right? But what happens to Manitobans when you don't support them? When you don't help them when they're vulnerable and their need? Well, they become desperate. And what do desperate people do? Well, they try to survive, and they survive the best they can, and often in ways that makes us all less safe. So this minister could prove that he's actually serious and could get on back to his office, sign the papers, and clear up this funding problem right now, today. And so ask yourself why he's not in a rush to do that, and why he would rather chase after these political ghosts of these defunders that only exist in his fever dreams, and wants to blame the federal government for a problem that they can solve, and has, that's the other part about this. Your grandfather's PC party believed in personal responsibility. The new Stephenson government believes in anything but. It's all about avoiding responsibility. It's always about deflecting and blaming others for the problems you created. So apparently, this government could fix the funding issue with the RCMP, but won't. But they're going to blame the federal government. But what is this government even doing to advocate on behalf of Manitobans? We've seen time and time again that the federal government has been dumping bags of money on their desk and offering to dump more, but there's always a catch. There's the catch that this Stephenson government would have to participate in programs that would actually assist people. And because they don't believe in that, they won't actually take that federal funding and they won't put it to work in Manitoba. You know, hopefully in a few months, with the change of government, Manitobans will see what it's like to have a government in place that puts Manitobans first, that wants to take whatever resources are available, whether they're from the federal government or not, and invest them back into Manitoba, because we believe that we're only as strong as a community as our most vulnerable people. And to judge a province and the success of a government, you have to look at the vulnerable people in that community and how they are treated. And when we look at Manitobans and look at what happens in the last 7 years, we can see the absolute sheer contempt this government has for them and how little they think of Manitobans, especially those that can't write $5,000 checks to the PC Party of Manitoba. That they will not invest in them, they will not stand with them, and in fact they will blame them for their own problems, and they will blame others for their own problems, and they will sit on their hands and do nothing. And again, why? Because the Galen Westons of the world are calling. Apparently they need another yacht, and this government wants to serve that up for them. So let's also look at some of the other, if we had a serious justice minister. Right now, we have a crisis in our Crown prosecutions where we have a huge vacancy rate. Crown attorneys can cross the border into Saskatchewan, Alberta, and get a $50,000 pay raise instantly. And they're leaving in droves. The ones remaining are just buried in workload. I'm hearing stories from Crown attorneys that come back to court and they're sitting in their office, they're breaking down and just crying. They're so frustrated, they're so overwhelmed, there's no supports, and after they collect themselves, they get on the internet and look for new jobs, and they're getting them. Because this government hasn't bargained fairly with Crown attorneys, and they still don't have a contract after a year, and this government doesn't want to pay RCMP officers because they have no respect for them, and they don't want to pay Crown attorneys because they have no respect for them. So who's the defunders in this scenario? It's this Stephenson government. Because if this Stephenson government was serious about protecting Manitobans, they would take care of frontline workers. They wouldn't make them argue and fight with this government for cost of living increases for over a year. They would be able to keep a court open in northern Manitoba. And let's talk about that. This government privatized government air services that used to fly into these, had reliable transportation into these courts. What did they do? They gave it to PC Donors and Friends, the Exchange Income Corporation, who Gary Filmon, former PC Premier, is making $200,000–300,000 a year as a board member for this corporation. And now we have unstable court services, and we can't hold court up in the north because this government's only rationale for existing is to pay off their donors and their party favorites. So I have lots more to say, but very little time. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The honourable member for Transcona.
Well, Thank you, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker. And I just want to, sorry, clear my throat. There's a lot to say on this PMR. I find it incredibly important to talk about this issue because of the very important words put on a record by my colleague, the member for Burroughs, and my colleague, the member for Fort Garry. We began this debate a number of weeks ago, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker, and it's an important one. The people of Transcona have entrusted me to represent them in this chamber. It's an incredible community, one that is incredibly supportive not only of the people that work in government, but also of the people that keep us safe. I was reminded of that this weekend as we, on the Transcona Trail on Saturday, unveiled a memorial to a former student of mine, Jordan Reimer, who was tragically taken from us by a drunk driver earlier this year on the corner of Kildare and Bond. Incredibly, we saw hundreds of people out, Assistant Deputy Speaker, supporting this family. On the path, as a beautiful bench was unveiled in her honor. A lot of tears were shed, and a lot of community bonding took place. Later that same afternoon, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker, we saw some more of that community spirit in the L'Arche Walk that took place in support of community living. Like I said earlier, it's an honor to stand in this House and represent the constituents of Transcona because they send me here to talk about important issues and to support what we believe as a community is important in Manitoba. You'll find, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker, too, that recently I had a former teacher of mine just recently pass away. I believe his service is tonight. I just want to put on the record that Carl Gratt was a teacher at John Gunn Junior High in the 70s when I was there as a student and was incredibly influential. But on to the matters at hand, the PMR, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker, calling on the federal government to absorb the costs of increased RCMP salaries. You know, I find it incredibly interesting that during a time of record federal transfer payments to this government, record hydro revenue to this government, record income tax revenue to this government, we are actually having to debate this PMR. I would wish that this government would spend the energy on actually partnering with the federal government and having a true dialogue on how to cover these increased costs instead of transferring them down to municipalities. This is at a time, also what I find incredibly interesting, Deputy Speaker, and somewhat troubling is this government is borrowing hundreds of millions of dollars to send out rebate checks to people that don't need them. Yeah. We had that outlined yesterday in question period. We've talked about this for weeks. Where are the priorities? Are there priorities with their municipal partners? Or are their priorities so misguided that they have to borrow hundreds of millions of dollars to send out rebate checks? I find it incredibly troubling as the member for Transcona, representing my constituents, that I have to explain why a government is borrowing hundreds of millions of dollars in a time of record revenues from the outlined three pieces that I talked about earlier: record federal transfer payments, record income tax revenue, and record revenue from Manitoba Hydro, that we're doing and having these priorities that don't reflect really the priorities of Manitobans. What they want is just like the member from Fort Garry pointed out earlier so eloquently, is a real partner in the provincial government with municipalities to provide important services such as policing. I can't believe that this isn't a priority, where they would seriously partner with the federal government to solve this issue. Instead, we continually see a government that kicks the can down the road to the point now where we're at 23% increased costs for policing downloaded to municipalities, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker. How can that happen when we have all of this revenue coming into this province of ours? It talks about setting priorities. Sorry, my voice is a little scratchy this morning. I thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker. Again, this is incredibly troubling because supports to municipalities were frozen. It's well documented that they closed the Dauphin jail. It's also well documented that they cut funding to the Justice Department for years. And then they bring forward this PMR calling on the federal government instead of taking responsibility. This is one thing, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker, that we always talk about in schools. It's taking responsibility for your actions. But they can't do that. If they were to take responsibility for their actions, they would have to own all of their decisions. That's the piece that they are reluctant to do. Decisions that municipalities have had to absorb the costs for. This is a government that doesn't want to truly partner with municipalities. The AMM is on record saying that their lack of support has led them to make these many impossible decisions on what to cut next, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker. You know, I mean, this sounds familiar because it's also the same thing that school divisions have to deal with, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker. Years of underfunding, years of unpredictable funding that have led school divisions and municipalities to make impossible decisions of what to cut next. What service do they curtail on next? Is it snow clearing? Do we not go down that service road that needs to have the snow cleared on a regular basis to ensure that emergency services can actually reach the homes when they need them? Like policing, RCMP, fire, all of those important pieces that municipalities are responsible for and demand a true partner in the provincial government with. This is what's missing. So then all of a sudden, when it comes to crunch time, they wash their hands, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker, and leave municipalities on their own. And then we have to debate this PMR. A PMR, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker, that didn't need to come if they had a true partner in the provincial government that has seen record revenue. But truly outlines what I believe is the way that they do not itemize the real priorities of Manitobans. When I began speaking a few minutes ago about how much of a privilege this is to be in here. Just imagine, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker, if you're given the privilege of government, of the responsibilities that you have to every citizen in this province. It is an awesome responsibility, one that cannot be taken lightly, Assistant Deputy Speaker. They want a government that brings forth PMRs, such as this, that are serious, that really reflect the values and the priorities of the citizens of this province. Instead, we're debating this piece here that has a government completely abdicating their responsibility to municipalities and by extension to its citizens. I find that incredible. But here we are. Here we are debating this particular piece. And what we have are many, many needs in our municipalities. I mean, we can outline them. They've been outlined this past week. We have, of course, the need because of climate change around proper transit systems. We have nothing. We have cuts to municipalities that resulted in cuts to transit. We have a third largest metropolitan area in this province, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker, that doesn't have a transit system. It's called Steinbach, Manitoba. They don't even have that. The municipality can't provide it because they don't have enough funding. So as I began 9 minutes and 40 seconds ago, representing the people of Transcona, we remain disappointed in the priorities set by this government and we'll hold them to account at election time. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
Thank you, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker. I'd like to, commend some of the words I've heard today with respect to this resolution. It's important that we're taking the time to debate this today because it's part of our jobs as MLAs here to debate the issues that are really critically important to Manitobans. And certainly, community safety is important to Manitobans. Obviously, I think healthcare is probably the #1 priority for a lot of Manitobans, top of mind, but it's undoubtedly community safety is an issue. But the problem with this resolution, as has been pointed out by my colleagues, the member from Transcona, the member for Fort Garry, the member for Burroughs, who've said it so eloquently today, this bill really isn't about community safety. It's not a serious resolution that we're debating today. It wasn't written in a serious tone. It wasn't crafted to be actually effective in delivering its message about community safety. In fact, it has a bit of community safety, but is such a thick, heavy layer of partisanship and political nature that it's hard to really discern what steps in here would actually deliver safer communities to Manitobans. And so, I have the utmost respect for law enforcement, especially those in Manitoba, RCMP and the Winnipeg Police Service. It's a tough job. And I think we're grateful for the work that they do. I myself have had the opportunity to go on a ride along with Winnipeg Police Service and see what it's like for them and get a small snippet of the everyday work that they put into in our communities. And I value that. And it's from those experiences that I can say that conversations with law enforcement, they've told me that as much as they value the work that they do in our community and it's valued, they know they can't do everything. They know that they can't do everything to help protect and keep communities safe, that they need additional supports. They need supports from people to help with social services in our community. And unfortunately, those very services have been cut by this PC government. Those services to deliver mental health supports to those who need it the most. When people are in crisis, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker, when they're going through a life crisis, a mental health crisis, and they need to get supports, they want to get it from someone who is particularly trained and specialized to deliver that type of crisis support. It's not always going to be the best fit for a police officer to deliver that right type of support for that individual in that particular case. And so if we don't fund one, we're putting an unburdened stress on that officer who should be doing other really important work in our communities. And that's not just a disservice to the individual who's going through a crisis, who needs a government to support them in the right way. It's a disservice to the police officer who is now being asked and tasked with doing a job that is not necessarily their expertise. And so we want to get, in my view, get policing to a role where they're doing a job that is best suited to them and put resources into specialists like mental health specialists, like addiction specialists in our communities who can help people and help them where they're at. Help community members where they're at. And that's a difficult thing to do. But, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker, if the government was really serious about this bill, they would have at least mentioned that in this resolution. They would have put it in some of the words here. And I'd like to read the words here, but it's not even worth reading. It's such an unserious written resolution that it's not worth repeating here. It's sufficient to say that the government doesn't take this issue seriously given the text that's written in this resolution, by the fact that they have ignored some of the critical issues of addressing community safety. They haven't even mentioned how they're going to tackle mental health and addiction issues, or the homelessness challenges, or tackle issues like poverty in our community. And we know all of these issues and and root cause trauma are some of the issues that people deal with when they're interacting with law enforcement, and leads to crime in our communities. And it's sad to say that the government is putting forward this sort of resolution that's calling on the federal government when, quite frankly, Mr. Assistant Deputy Minister, the minister could call. The minister here could call his federal counterpart and make this ask if he really wanted to. He doesn't need this resolution to do that. The premier could call the federal counterpart and make this call that they're asking. They don't need this resolution here. This resolution is shrouded in a political nature and in a partisan language, and it has no bearing in the fact that the minister could make the call. And I know the opposite side has had such fractured relationships with folks over the past number of years. We know the former Premier, Brian Pallister, had such a fractured relationship with the former mayor. We know right now, today, there's a fractured relationship between this Premier, the Health Minister, and healthcare workers. We know that this government has fractured relationships. Frankly, fractured relationships and the PC government go hand in hand. It's like peanut butter and jelly. They just stick together, fractured relationships. And so I'm not surprised, Mr. Assistant Deputy Minister, that if the minister called his federal counterpart, he'd maybe not even pick up the phone because of that fractured relationship. Maybe that's why he's brought this here today, because that relationship is so fractured that he wouldn't even pick up the phone for the provincial minister. Perhaps that's why he's brought this forward, because he hasn't had the relationship. But he could also send an email. If he can't pick up the phone, he could send an email to make a call for funding for RCMP. But he apparently hasn't or can't, and he's brought this forward today, this resolution that's wrapped and shrouded in partisan political language. And I think that that says quite a lot about the nature of this PC government, that they would rather play partisan and political games than do the work that would actually help communities in Manitoba. And communities in Manitoba are going to note this. They're going to remember this. They're going to remember this time when this government had a choice between doing two things. One, helping communities and standing up for them, investing in community safety, investing in the lives of Manitobans, or play political and partisan games and have us debate a ridiculous resolution in the House here for no other benefit of Manitobans, I might add. Which one did they choose? They chose to play political and partisan games instead of helping the lives of regular Manitobans. So, Mr. Assistant Deputy Speaker, I think it's important that I talk about, before I conclude my remarks, I want to talk about something very important. I want to talk about something very important when it comes to dealing with the notion of this resolution. The fact that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this government for years has repeatedly made life more difficult for municipalities to address community safety. So not only is this bill wrapped in political and partisan language, not only does it fail to address key issues to keeping community safety, like addressing mental health and addiction issues and poverty and dealing with trauma, it actually is a slap in the face, because this government has frozen municipal funding for years. They have frozen municipal funding, which has made it more difficult for municipalities to fund RCMP each and every year of this government's tenure. And so, in fact, with the rising inflation that we've seen over the past many years, and this government's choice, their decision, their conscious effort to freeze municipal funding, who in fact has defunded the police? I think it's clearly this PC government.
Yes, it is.
And so for them to now, at this point, just months away from an election, to bring this forward, when in fact they have A, underfunded municipalities and thus underfunded RCMP, when they have B, simply ignored the core issues of keeping communities safe, And when given the choice between doing the right thing and helping Manitobans who are in need, and actually instead bring forward a resolution that is wrapped in political and partisan language, this government has failed on all three levels. And Manitobans are going to remember this, Mr. Deputy Speaker. They're going to remember this not only today, not only tomorrow, not on Thursday, but they'll remember
Member's
it
time has expired. Before I recognize the next speaker, it was getting a little loud in here from both sides. I'd ask everybody to please keep the noise level down. Members, please keep the noise level down. And for the speakers to please try to remain relevant to the resolution here that we're discussing today. Thank you very much, and I would expect that things should change in here for the next 20 minutes. The Honourable Member for Point Douglas.
Miigwech, Acting Deputy Speaker, and I just want to continue on from the rest of the speakers this morning and really, hammer down that this government is not doing their part in terms of supporting RCMP and the municipalities that are actually, underfunded year after year from this government. They've given them basket funding and said, oh, here, you go do what you want with it. And if you mismanage your money because you can't do everything that needs to be done, that's your fault. But it's actually on this government because they are underfunding 23%. 23%, and they don't want to take responsibility for that. Now they're bringing a resolution forward, and like my colleague said, the Premier can just pick up the phone. She can call the Prime Minister, she can call the Justice Minister, she can have a conversation, and they can discuss how they can both, come to the table and make sure that municipalities aren't having to raise taxes. We're in an inflation crisis in this province. People are struggling. People who, were able to put money away in the bank are no longer able to do that. And this government is going to force municipalities, because they have no relationship or very little relationship with any of their partners, because they've continued to not come to the table in a good way. We saw that with Pallister, picking fights with the mayor, picking fights with the Prime Minister. We see that carry on with the Stephenson government. We can have a good relationship with our municipalities and with our Winnipeg Police, our RCMP. I've worked extensively with the RCMP, actually. Have a good relationship with them. They talk about the resources that they need to support those that are struggling. And my colleagues outline that. Mental health, addictions, domestic violence. They need social workers. They're not able to hire those. They need a liaison worker when someone goes missing or is murdered to come in and help support that family. The Winnipeg Police, thankfully, have been able to do that through victim services, but the RCMP aren't able to do that because of the underfunding from this government. They're trying to shirk their responsibility onto the federal government and not come to the table with their fair share. We look at all of the cuts that this government has created, this level of crime that we see in Manitoba. It's due to their cuts. It's due to the social services cuts that they have created. You look at the housing. You only have to drive past one social housing to see that they're boarded up. We're in a housing crisis. And does this government bother to fix up the existing housing that we have? Acting Deputy Speaker, what they're trying to do is they're trying to shirk their responsibility, just like they're trying to do with the federal government, to agencies, to say to agencies, here, you take over this social housing, we'll give it to you, because they don't want to be landlords. They don't want to have the responsibility of fixing up social housing and ensuring those folks that are outside. We walk out this Manitoba Legislature, there's people sleeping in bus shacks. People sleeping in bus shacks. That's not dignity. for folks, and it's a responsibility of this government, and it's these cuts that they've made, and they don't want to come to the table to help with policing, and policing are saying we need funding from this government. RCMP need funding from provincial government, and they're trying to say, well, it's all on the federal government. Well, come to the table and talk to the federal government. They don't need to bring a resolution like this forward. If they had a relationship and they had a partnership, they would come to the table and figure it out. Because Manitobans are going to know if their taxes go up, who is actually responsible for that? And that's going to be this PC government, because they are forcing municipalities to raise taxes, which is going to force, Manitobans to make tough decisions.
You raise taxes on that?
Whether that's taking out of their rainy day fund because they have to pay higher taxes because RCMP, have increased 23%, and the money has to come from somewhere. And municipalities are going to be forced to put that on to Manitobans. And that's not fair to Manitobans. Families are struggling to put money away for education. And we have a government here that underfunds education. I look at Selkirk Avenue. That was supposed to be a bustling hub for education. Very little folks from the North End inner city are actually attending school there. It's actually folks from other areas that are coming to attend classes there. That was created to help lift people out of poverty. This government, through their austerity, through their cuts to social programming, through their cuts to social work, has created, this increase in crime that we see here in the city. And I want to talk a little bit about the North End because, the North End is a lot like the North.
I would ask.
That has the RCMP police there.
I would ask the member to please be a little bit more relevant to the resolution here. If she could bring it back, please.
Well, I would say that. Sorry.
The honourable member for Point Douglas.
Miigwech, and when I'm talking about policing, I'm referencing the Winnipeg Police to the RCMP and what's happening here in the city, and actually what's happening in like Thompson or the Paw, some of these areas that have the same issues as the Winnipeg Police. I'm talking to RCMP, and RCMP are saying that they don't have the resources to support. They're seeing an increase in addictions, which we're seeing here in the city. They don't have addiction support workers. They don't have access to be able to hire them. They have, they can barely pay their staff that they have. And this government continues to underfund municipalities and the RCMP, and it's helping, to create this increase in crime that we see. So I want to go back to some of the root causes of why we need more policing in the rural areas, and why they're asking for more funding. Their salaries have increased. 2017, under this government, they've not had a raise. Now a 23% increase. Where's that going to come from? They're trying to say to the federal government that it's all of their responsibility. But Acting Deputy Speaker, it's a responsibility of both governments. And this government should come to the table in good faith. They should ensure that it isn't shirked on to the taxpayers, that they're not having to pay increased taxes while this government continues to increase hydro rates for Manitobans. They continue to increase rent rates here in Manitoba, and Manitobans are struggling already. So if you put that on top of, what they're having to pay for their taxes because they have to pay for the increase in RCMP salaries, Manitobans they're not going to have the wool pulled over their eyes by this government. They're going to know exactly why their taxes are increasing, because the RCMP salaries are increasing, because they failed to come to the table to pay their fair share and want to blame it on the federal government when they also have a responsibility. So we're coming to an election, and this government is making a lot of announcements, empty announcements that are far and few too late. We have people who are struggling with poverty. We have people who are struggling with mental health. We have people that are dying of addictions in this province. This government is not addressing any of that. They're putting it onto policing. RCMP are struggling. They've had meetings. This government knows what the struggles are, and they've asked for this government to help support them in making sure that they're not responding to mental health calls, that there's a social worker that's coming there to do that. If someone's in addiction crisis, that they're not being held up at that while maybe someone is being domestically abused. There's a violent act happening, but they're here helping someone that is struggling with addictions. That an addiction support worker can actually come there and do that work. When we look at the housing crisis, often you see the RCMP responding to someone who is sleeping in a bus shelter. Should it be the RCMP? RCMP are saying no, it shouldn't be. They would assist if needed if someone is violent, but they want to see more supports within the RCMP to be able to have social workers respond to those types of things. So I want to say to this government that, an election is coming. Manitobans know who they can count on.
The member's time has expired. The honourable member for Elmwood.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm very pleased to speak to this PMR today, calling on the federal government to absorb the cost of increased RCMP salaries. Reading this resolution, you wouldn't really think that there was increased revenue coming to Manitoba. We have record revenues. It's unlikely that it's going to continue into the future, given the prospect of possibly a recession coming up. And I could understand that if this government was running huge deficits with shorter revenue, federal transfers were down, that they could make this argument that the municipalities should pay the bills and the federal government should pay the bills. But that's not what is going on here. This is all part of an election strategy to build wedges, and I understand why they're doing it. They're not only doing it here, they've got this friendly Saskatchewan group that's running TAC ads, which, by the way, they better check those ads because they could end up paying out a fair amount of money in a lawsuit very soon on that. And the answer is it's a pretty straightforward case too, I will tell you. But they obviously are not paying much attention.
The RCMP.
Yeah, they're just accepting that facts are facts, but they're not facts. They're not real. They were not real in 2008, 15 years ago. And they're not real now. But there was an audit in the meantime that said of all 57 MLAs in the legislature, over a 2-year period, they audited every expense. And there was not a problem with any one of them. So this is a case that wouldn't even end up going to trial. It'll be settled out of court, right? And so I would caution them to be careful.
Order. If the member could please bring it back into the scope of the resolution before us, it needs to be relevant to what we're discussing here. The honourable member for Elmwood.
Well, thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I consider that very relevant to what is going on with this resolution. I mean, it's all part of the same picture. To try to draw wedges just before an election. Once again, we have record revenues. And what are they doing with the record revenues? They could be taking care of this issue or helping to take care of this issue with the federal government, but no, they don't want to do that. They want to try to buy as many votes as they can by sending rebate checks out, okay? There's rebate checks. There's all sorts of different programs they have right now that they didn't have before. They waited for all these years, didn't come out with any of these programs until just before the election. Well, I think the average voter, and I talk to a lot of average voters quite often, and I can tell you that they see through this. They say, yeah, they're happy to get their checks, but they're certainly not voting for the PCs because they remember how they balanced the budget in the first place. You know, it's not that hard to do just on infrastructure alone. All you have to do is put all the projects on hold, or most of them on hold, and when you do that, you don't spend the money. That's simple as that. You just simply underspend your budget. And that's basically what they've done. And that's just one area in infrastructure. When you take a look at healthcare, you see the same issues of cuts throughout the system. And that is how they end up with a balanced budget. Well, the public know that. The public understand firsthand what is going on with their services. When the healthcare is not there anymore, when the infrastructure isn't being replaced, and all of a sudden they're getting checks in the mail. And they're wondering, what is all this about? And so they think that somehow this is going to benefit in the long run, but I can assure you that there's lots of evidence to show that this particular strategy of theirs is not going to work. And the fact of the matter is that, you know, I think we should just get into the election. I mean, you want to have an election? Let's have an election. You know, why do we have to keep torturing ourselves, you know, day after day, dealing with these issues when we know what this is all about? There's no secrets here. We know this is all about an election coming up. And, you know, it depends on what level you're prepared to go to get the results you want. But if you have to go and throw things off to Saskatchewan and the federal PCs. Anyway, I will continue this conversation later.
Are there any further speakers? Is the House ready for the question? The question before the House is calling, resolution number 9, calling on the federal government to absorb the cost of increased RCMP salaries. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt this resolution? I hear a no. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Nay. In my opinion, the ayes have it. I declare this motion carried. And the hour being 12 o'clock, this House is recessed and stands recessed until 1:30 p.m. today.